Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Soul Goals Podcast. I'm Dawn, and I'm so glad you're joining me today. This podcast is dedicated to bringing people's stories to light and hearing their journeys of inspiration and self-growth. But it's also about connection and knowing that you are not alone. Each week, I get the chance to sit down and talk with an amazing soul, someone I've had the blessing of either meeting or following in my life. I am so grateful for my guests. Their openness and their vulnerability, it is unmatched as we share heartfelt conversations together about both their challenges and their triumphs. I hope that you can grab some inspiration and connection from my guests and their stories. I know I certainly have with each conversation. What an honor to sit with these brave souls. Everyone has a story, folks. And every story matters. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Soul Goals. I am Dawn, and today I get to speak with one of the most delightful people that I have crossed paths with in my life thus far. Amanda is a mother, right, of four beautiful children, ages 11 and down.
Like, so 12 now. Yeah.
12. Oh my gosh. She just turned 12. Right. Yep. Yeah. Busy household much?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Amanda hails from Nashville, Tennessee with her family, and her extended family as well is all in this area too, correct?
Yep, that's right. We're all born and raised here.
You born and raised. Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah. So Amanda has agreed to sit down and chat today about her daughter's story and therefore her and her husband's story within her daughter's circumstance. As new parents, Amanda and her husband, like everybody that goes through everything, it's like, oh, yay, we meet, we fall in love, we're going to get married, we're going to start a family. And, when you have that first child, I know when I had the first child, it was like I had big old goose egg, zero idea of like what to expect. Like you just do it. You just figure it out. But at 18 months, their beautiful firstborn, and at that point, your only child at that point, was diagnosed with a tumor located on her brainstem that was inoperable and has accompanied her for the last 12 years. So, yeah, without further ado, guys, let's welcome Amanda to the show. Yay! Thank you for being here. Hey, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you had some time today with you have two girls and two boys.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And your husband is a coach too. So you guys are super athletic.
Yeah. Well, maybe some washed up athletes, but yes, we, he played football in college and I played soccer in college, and we are, an athletic loving family. And he is now a high school teacher and football coach. So
I love it. I love it. Does he love being a high school coach?
He does. It's his passion. It's, his drive. And we support him 100% because it's what makes him happy, and in turn makes the rest of us happy.
You know what? You're right. You're right. I mean, ideally you want to do the thing that fulfills you because that just expands out to all the people around you. Absolutely. Have you ever thought about coaching? You played soccer in college.
Yeah, I've dabbled in just a little bit of it, but I surprisingly, and I think you probably know this, I coached Emma in volleyball a couple seasons, which I did not play a lot of volleyball. You are very familiar with it. So I like to go on the sports that I haven't played a lot of. My experience was like middle school volleyball, but they've always had really good coaches in other sports, and I'm always there to step in if I'm needed. But if someone else is taking the reins, I just like to be a supportive mom on the sidelines.
Yeah. And I think you get to be the sports mom that you are the epitome of the soccer mom. Yeah. All right. Golly. All right. So let's dive right in. Your oldest is Emma, and she just had her 12th birthday. Is that correct?
Yeah, she's 12 and a half. So she turned 12 back in April. We have a preteen right now.
Okay. She's broaching the teenage years. Welcome to that in another 6 months.
Right.
It's going to be great. But Emma's a delightful child, and we'll get into what makes her different and how she's had to become a different child as we go on through our conversation. But it was roughly 11 years ago. And before we hit the record, you were telling me that this is kind of we're recording this in November. It probably won't be played until a later date, but this is a really monumental time of the year for you, you said, because this was around the time when her diagnosis
Yeah,
first happened, correct?
that's correct. She was diagnosed on November the 13th of 2012. So it brings up all the feelings and emotions every year. Like that has not changed at all. We feel these same feelings. The date comes upon us and we're like, whew, it just doesn't go away. It doesn't fade.
Yeah. Yeah. What are the feelings that you go through? What are some of the biggest ones that you work through at this time each year?
Yeah, just remembering the fear and
Mhm.
just being worried, not knowing what to do,
Mhm.
not knowing what the future was holding. And here we are, 11 years later. And oh, if we could only see, and that just, gets us worked up and emotional. And just remembering each day
Mm.
the challenges we would walk through because there was a lot going on that November and December that she was diagnosed.
Mhm.
And we were in and out of the hospital a lot during that time. So we just say, oh my goodness, remember this day? Oh, we were, admitted for this reason, or, oh yeah, I remember when this happened, or,
Yeah.
so we just kind of work through that and talk through it. And it's always, oh, the day's approaching. So
Yeah. It's almost like your body has a memory and it feels it. Yeah. How does, well, Emma was 18 months old when
mhm.
she was first diagnosed. So how at 12 years old does she have any recall? I mean, obviously of the treatments and the things that she went through as she aged, she probably does.
Mhm.
But I
Not
mean,
really at the time. And we've asked, and as really she had no clue that anything was that different, except for she was going to the doctor a lot more than
mhm,
her little sister was. And she knew that we had to get her blood pressure taken more and we had to get labs drawn more, and she would go have MRIs, and she was put to sleep for those, so she didn't have like memory of the MRI when she was younger. But she we've kind of gradually, age appropriately, let her understand what's happened to the point where she knows everything now. She
yeah.
knows basically the extent, and she asks more questions too as she's gotten older. And we just kind of let her lead that conversation.
Yeah, and I think obviously as she ages, she's going to still continue to ask more, probably in depth as she matures, questions about her process. Yeah.
Mhm.
How did
Absolutely.
you know that there was something wrong? That's the million dollar question,
Yeah.
because if there's parents that are listening with small children, especially if you're a first time parent and you suspect something may not be okay with your child, I mean, I would assume that your gut as a mom probably said, okay,
Yeah.
something's happening and I don't know what it is, but I feel it.
That is exactly right. And that was, I didn't know what the mom gut feeling was because I hadn't been a mom before. And here I am with my firstborn, and
Mhm.
we're going through all these milestones together. And, she's learning to stand, to walk, do all these things, starting to babble, say words, eat solid foods.
Uh-huh.
And so it was about the summer before, so summer of 2012.
Mhm.
We just kind of noticed sporadically that she would, this happened not often at all, not often enough to count. She was a toddler, but she
Mhm.
would randomly run into a wall
Oh,
or just, and I looked at my mom one day and we were talking about this and I was like, is that normal? I know toddlers are clumsy. And she's like, I mean, you guys would run into things or whatever. And it would happen, once every couple of weeks. So this was probably deep summer. Come September, around that time, I noticed that when she was laughing or crying, that like only half of her face would move. So it was kind of like one side of her face was paralyzed.
yeah.
And if you've ever heard of Bell's palsy, that can happen after
Yeah.
losing one side, like unilateral paralysis on one side of your face caused by like a virus.
Mhm.
And we're like, maybe that's what she has. I didn't know that little toddlers and babies could get that.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
yeah. And so she was in daycare. We were both working full time. She
Mhm.
was in daycare at the time. And, she was getting all the illnesses and viruses and things. So she actually, since she was about 9 months old, she had also, this was before all this happened, had febrile seizures, which
Oh.
was a new thing for us, the most scary and traumatic thing. And they truly were febrile seizures. Her temperature would spike
Mm.
really fast
Mhm.
and she would just have a seizure.
Mhm.
Um, and we were like, oh my goodness. Of course, the first time it was just the most terrifying thing. After that,
Yeah,
how to handle it. There's just, get their fever down, and then treat the virus or the infection, whatever's going on.
sure.
So we had that also in the background too. It just kind of plays a little bit into our diagnosis.
That was prior to
Yeah,
you observing like the side of the face situation that
yeah,
you talked about,
yeah.
or noticing that, hey, she's running into a wall, and that might be something that I want to question a little bit.
And it was really a lot of non-specific things that did not happen, enough to really just warrant I'm going to call my doctor. I just felt like I would think I was crazy. They would think I was crazy if I went in there because I was first time mom too. And it
Yeah.
wasn't enough yet. We knew about the febrile seizures and how to handle those. But the whole like running into the wall thing, the one side of the face, we're like, well, maybe it's just, we'll just see. And we kind of, we tabled that and we're just like, we're going to bring it up at our 18-month appointment, which was in that October. So
Okay.
she had just gotten through Labor Day weekend that year. She had a really bad like ear infection or something. She had a virus too. She had all kinds of stuff going on and
Mm-hmm.
she just really wasn't feeling well. And I started noticing at nighttime, she would kind of like wheeze a little bit where she had a
Okay.
high pitched breathing noise when she would sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sporadic also. It was not anything that was like continual. So I was kind of like, oh, weird.
Yeah.
So we made that appointment. I said, we're just going to talk about it all at the appointment. And we went through our whole 18-month appointment. At the end of it, I said, I have a couple concerns with what's going on with her right now. And I said, can you look at these pictures I've taken of her? Because I had pictures of her where half of
Of the
her,
face.
yeah, I just,
Yes.
being a nurse, documentation is like important to me. So I was,
Yes.
you need to see it. And because she wouldn't really mimic it when we were at the, an 18-month-old, hey, do that face again or cry. Let me see how you're,
Yeah.
doing
Right.
your face. Like she wouldn't do it. And
Mhm.
so he was like, that is a little odd,
Mhm.
and he said, with the other symptoms going on too. He was like, how about like, just to be safe, I'll send you guys to a neurologist. And we're like,
Okay.
okay. And now of course, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my goodness, like what is going on? Like if this
Hmm.
is Bell's palsy caused by a virus, like why do we need to go see a neurologist?
Right.
And
And you
so
said you
that,
were a nurse at this time as
yeah.
well. So what kind of nurse were you practicing or medicine practicing at
Med-surg,
that point?
post-op. So I did adults and not
No
kids. That was not
pediatrics.
my thing. No.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So, and also just to add to that, my mom and my mother-in-law are both nurses also,
Oh
who have had,
gosh.
yes, a lot of experience in like, critical care, emergency care, like all of that. They
Yeah.
are very intelligent women.
Yes.
And my reference still, when it comes to medical issues, and I think all the families,
Yeah.
everybody goes to them.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. So we ended up seeing a neurologist, and
Mhm.
Vanderbilt, the main hospital here in Nashville, is just if you have an issue, unless it's life threatening, you're going to wait. And that is,
Mhm.
I mean, and that is truly how it should be because people who have things that are affecting them immediately should be there immediately. So
Right.
we were on a long wait list, but there was another neurologist that was closer to town, Dr. Cruz, and we're forever grateful for him.
Yeah.
And we've said that, and it was amazing. We went to go see him, me and Pat and Emma, and he went through he did a whole neuro exam. He was like, I'm just not really seeing, much. And we were like, yeah, we don't really know. And he said, well, maybe one side of her, maybe like a touch weaker than the other, but not enough to warrant much. I think that this probably is Bell's palsy we're dealing with here.
Okay.
So, and he had said, I think just to be on the safe side, because we told him about her history of febrile seizures. And for some reason, that just, having a seizure in general is a lot of times something, when you think of like brain tumors, a lot of people think of seizures and things.
Well,
And
just
while
or something underlying. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
knowledgeable in the medical field, but
Mhm.
I think if my child has a seizure, I feel like there's probably like
Yeah.
that's the consequence of a root of some sort.
Absolutely. And that is, yes, exactly.
Mhm.
And it was always really unsettling to us when she would have them. And, while they did not have anything to do with her brain tumor, and she's grown out of them since then, at the time, I feel like it was one of the things that helped us get imaging sooner rather
Mhm.
than later. I think
Okay.
we would have had to wait it out had that not happened. And the other, like, in addition to the other symptoms of like the nighttime wheezing and the running into things and just all those things together without her as an 18-month-old being able to verbalize, you know what, my head hurts, I feel dizzy, I feel
Right.
nauseous.
How hard was that?
It was pretty difficult. It was pretty difficult. That was probably the hardest thing, her not being able to tell us.
Yeah.
But throughout the whole process, this is,
Mhm.
I feel this. You help me. This is how
Mhm.
you can help me because I'm feeling this. Whether
Yeah.
it be, nauseous, I'm about to, throw up, or my
Right.
head really hurts, or something hurts, or something's wrong.
Right, right. Yeah, I
Mhm.
didn't even think about that, but that barrier of communication when they're a toddler and they don't have their language skills yet, and
Absolutely.
they're just growing into their bodies, and that in and of itself is a process. I mean,
It
yeah.
is. It is.
Gosh. So your neurologist was really you say you feel really, really
Yeah,
grateful that this is where
I
you
felt like
landed.
he in addition to our pediatrician, we're both like, moms have, an instinct about them. They have that gut feeling.
Yeah.
And I just kept telling him, I was like, I just feel like something is just a little off. And he
Mhm.
said, I think we're gonna do an MRI.
Mm.
And it was just to be safe. That was it. So we were
Yeah.
like, okay. I mean, we didn't take that lightly, our child getting an MRI or anything, but at the same time, we knew that it was going to bring just peace of mind. Like, we were going to feel better about everything and say, oh, we can just go on with our lives and just
Right.
try to figure out, if things would improve.
You'll
So,
have a direction. You'll know
yeah,
something with substance of what the game plan is gonna be moving forward.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And so that is kind of what led us to the day of diagnosis,
Okay.
which, yeah, so we ended up, like I said, Vanderbilt is very hard to get into if you don't
Mhm.
have something that is like emergent. So we
Mhm.
got we got scheduled for an MRI. I mean, this is October. We got scheduled for an MRI in the end of November. And
Oh,
I mean, the anxiety I felt, and I don't think
yeah,
I had truly felt that feeling of anxiousness until that moment. I
yeah,
thought, oh my gosh. So I just, I sat with my feelings, and I
yeah.
was like, and this was, I think, a Thursday or a Friday. And they were like, well, we have you scheduled for the end of November. And I thought, I can't even go through the weekend without this,
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, you're a first-time mom, first-time
Mhm.
parents in general, and you're waiting to hear, "Okay, my 18-month-old is gonna have an MRI." Like, that's big, no matter
It
what you're
was.
facing.
Yeah, it was big. It was a big deal.
Then you put all the things on top of that that she's feeling or that she's going through that
Mhm.
she can't say, but that
Right.
you as a mom know something's not right. I can't put my finger on it. I just wanna know. Yeah.
Mhm.
That
Yeah,
anxiety
that's
has to
exactly
been
right.
just so intense.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. It's a good word for it. A very intense time. And
Mhm.
I was at work the day I got the call about her MRI. So I was at the nurse's station returning a call, and I broke down. Like, I broke down in tears at the
Yeah.
nurse's station, and I worked with the most amazing group of nurses on that floor. And they were all just like, we don't know what's going to happen. And they were rallying around me saying, like, let's call, let's see if we can get her in sooner. And I think about all the people I encountered during that time, because
Mhm.
the secretary in imaging, she sat and she was like, I know you're worried. She was like, let me just see. I've got you on my first call list if somebody cancels. But the thing with Emma was she was young, so she had to be sedated, which meant
Mhm.
she was under anesthesia, which meant she couldn't eat. And so they're trying to, think about time frame. Also, they like to do kids early in the morning, so that way it
Yes.
doesn't affect them as much.
Yes.
Um, but it was a lot of back and forth, and she finally got us, like, she called me, I think, right at the end of my shift that day, and she said, somebody just called and canceled for November 13th. I can fit you guys in. And I was crying again because I was just
Yes.
like, thank you so much. Like, this
Yeah.
means the world to
Yeah.
me. Like, she knew that we were worried. She knew that there was something going on. And, I think that things just like lined up in that sense for us to be there on that day.
Yes.
Um, that's kind of how it led to November 13th being the day of her MRI,
Okay.
which just like kind of the day of, it's just all embedded in our minds.
Right, right. Did you get the information immediately after the MRI on the 13th?
We did.
Okay.
We did. So it ended up being kind of a chaotic day. I wasn't working that day. Pat had taken off, and this was November. So he was still in football season at that time.
Oh, wow.
He was,
Busy. Yeah.
it was probably like in the tournament also. I'm assuming
Yes.
that's just how the time frames line up.
Yeah.
But he was there. We were both there, and they kept pushing our time back. They were backed up. They had things that came in, and
Mm.
that's just how it works. And I understood that just because I know how hospitals and how things get backed up and emergencies go first, and
Right.
that was totally fine. Emma was fussy.
Oh
She
gosh.
hadn't eaten, so we had gotten. I think we were originally scheduled for 11 a.m. and we were pushed back to like I don't know, or maybe it was early in the morning. We got pushed back to the afternoon, but they had
Oh,
given us like a food voucher or something. And she finally went back. She finally went back like 3 or 4 hours after the scheduled time, which
wow.
we never experienced again to this date, even with like backups. I think it was just a very unusually busy day there.
Yeah.
Um, so we sent her back. She was sedated. And she was back there for a couple hours. They take a while to do the MRIs.
Mhm.
And then we got a call. They call you and say, your child's in recovery. You can come
Mhm.
on back. So Pat, I was like, my mom had gotten off work early to come help me with Emma, just, if I needed moral support,
Right.
and just a grumpy toddler after not eating. And so she,
I can imagine. I can imagine an 18-month-old with no
oh
food
yeah,
all day.
and
Oh,
grumpy she was. That
yes,
was the beginning
right.
of her anesthesia in her, and I think in a lot of kids too. Like the mood swings after anesthesia were brutal, very very
Yes.
brutal.
Yes.
Where am I? What's happening? So she came into recovery, and at that point I said, okay, we'll be back there. And Pat was just waiting for her to get into recovery. He said, he was already late for practice, so he's like, I'm gonna go. I said, go
Okay.
ahead. My mom's here.
Yeah.
So my mom and I went back to a little recovery room that they have back in
Yeah.
the imaging area, and I've gotten really familiar and used to that place. But there's a little room, and I was like, "Oh, they stuck us in a room because I could hear her screaming. She was so upset." And I thought,
Oh, she
I
was waking up. Yes.
was waking up, and the nurses were trying to give her some juice and some
Yeah.
food, and she was not happy. So I was trying to hold her. She's just not really receptive. My mom was like, "Let me just take her," and she was
Yeah.
receptive to my mom. And like she kind of sat with my mom, and
Mhm.
which was actually like a blessing right then,
Mhm.
because I was like, okay, we're cool now. We're gonna go. Um, get her all these lines, the IV and everything, all the patches off of her, and then we're going to go home. They'll call us in a week or two and we'll know the
Right.
results.
Right.
So we sat in the room, and the next thing we knew, there was a doctor that came in the room, and I was like, oh, how
And
interesting. Like, I didn't know that they were going to give us these results same day. Like, very naive, and I should know better. Like, I should have known better.
yeah.
But he was the head of the neurosurgery team, and he had his fellow with him.
Mhm.
And he had said, right before he came in, the nurses were like, "Where's your husband? I thought he was here." And I was like, "Oh no, he had to go back to work. Like, it's
Mhm.
fine. Like, I've got my mom here." And
Yeah. Yeah.
they were like, "Oh, okay." And I could just tell because they knew
They knew something was up and they wanted to make sure that you had all the support and everyone
support.
was there.
They
Yeah.
did, yeah, they did. So we're fine, and I just
Uh-huh.
kind of, but so at that moment, the neurosurgeon, Dr. Pearson, he said, we were looking at her MRI and we noticed that there is a tumor on her brainstem. And I'm sure my face just was white as a ghost. And
Yeah.
I don't know what my mom was feeling at the time, but I'm sure it was the same as what I felt. And I'm sure she was feeling it for me as well,
Yes. Yes,
as a
for sure.
mom, as a grandmother and as a mom.
Mhm.
And they said, yeah, we found tumor. And I was truly shocked. I was just like, that is
Yeah.
shocking. Like, of course it's in the back of my mind as we're going through this, but it is truly shocking to hear that. Like, I
I
don't
don't
need
even know
anything
that
to do for that.
right. Well, I wouldn't even know that a tumor would be in anywhere in my mind at
Mhm.
that point.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I think just the like nurse side of me was just always thinking that there is
Yeah.
possibly,
Mhm.
something, but
Something
my
else.
mom kept saying, she just doesn't have all that. And I was like, you're right. I'm like worrying too much. And
Mhm.
in many other instances, I probably was worrying too much about different things
Yeah,
with
yeah.
all my kids.
Right, well, it's what we do as moms.
That's
I
right.
understand that. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yep. Yep. So he was like, I'm going to take you out here and I want you to see this. And this is like a very, very like a core memory for me because we
Mm,
came out of the room and he pulled up on on their computers, and there's like a big screen computer there where they could look at the MRI images, and each like click of a mouse, he was like, this is a normal tissue in the brain, and he would click it and it would get deeper in the brain. He was like, this is normal tissue, and we kept getting deeper and deeper, and I thought he said there was a tumor.
Yeah.
And here we are. He's like, now this is the pons and the brainstem, and you can see this tumor now. You can start to see it. And he would just get deeper, like he would go deeper into the brain, and it was evident that there was this mass that was sitting in there. And it was devastating. It was devastating.
I mean, as you are being walked through this with the doctor, I mean, what are you going through? Devastation. What's the first thing? Oh my gosh, is this, I mean, all the questions were coming up at that point, or were you still in that place of shock?
I was really shocked, and I was like sobbing uncontrollably because and it was not like loud sobbing. It was just silent tears, just like streaming down my face. And the two nurses that were there were with us like throughout a lot of her imaging. They were crying. Everybody back there was crying. It was so emotional. I was scared, but not like super fearful yet. I was just kind of very like, what has happened? What is going on? And the other part of that was, I was like, I remember I was like, how? And they were like, it is nothing that you've done. And they were just kept reassuring me, like, you haven't done anything. We don't know why this happens. Let's just plan. We're going to admit her immediately. And they were like, you need to call your husband. And that at that point, I was like, what?
How do I have this conversation with my husband who is at work over the telephone, telling him our daughter is getting ready to be admitted to the hospital. You need to come here now.
Yeah. And it was one of the worst conversations I've ever had to have. They had said there was a private room like around the corner. And so I went, my mom was just kind of holding on to Emma in the recovery room still and trying to feed her. And I went to the other room and I called Pat, and he was at football practice, and I was like, you need to come here immediately. And I was like, Emma has a brain tumor. And I sometimes wonder if it was right to tell him immediately, but I just could not process it all by myself. And he was just like, what? And he just was like, I'm coming now, and just sped to get there, called his mom on the way. And we immediately had a lot of family there.
Right. Which is great. That support system you've had around you, born and raised here in the same area, was magnificent from the very beginning for you. Yeah. When the doctors gave you that when they brought you into the room and showed you the imaging, what were some of the things that they were telling you about what this looks like moving forward? Were they giving you messages of, hey, this is manageable? Or were they saying, we really don't know what direction this is headed in, or we need to do more, and this is what that looks like?
Yeah, it was more of the latter, where this is not in a good place. Now, it could very well be like a low-grade tumor, which was what we were hoping for. Or it could be something else, but they weren't really like entertaining the words around that. And, just like all of the scary things that go along with it. They were just kind of like, here we are. We're going to make a plan. We're going to probably need to biopsy. Based on this imaging, we are going to need to biopsy because of the pons involvement and the brainstem involvement. There was a lot of worry that it was something that was a lot worse than what it ended up being. So we were very grateful. I mean, obviously very grateful for that. But we had to do, they just said, we're going to admit you. We're going to do another MRI on her spine to make sure that's not involved. And we're going to start a game plan here. And that's kind of how her whole treatment started with that.
And then you were off and going. You were off
and going. So,
then you think about this too, like as a toddler that is still developing neurologically and physically, like that can't, like you said earlier, can't give you feedback about how she's feeling. I mean, these doctors had to have been like, they're angels to be able to deal with this, to be able to put all of the pieces together with a little person that can't give you that vital information.
Oh yeah, I agree completely. They all are. all of the providers that were involved in her care. I mean, just listening to me, following their gut as well.
Right.
We often wonder, not to like live on the what ifs, but like if things happened late at later dates, who knows what deficits that she would
Mm,
have to this
yeah.
day. So
That was going to be my next question. Did they say anything at that point that this might be affected? Your child may be X, Y, or Z, or did they not just, they didn't go there. They're like, let's
yeah,
just go.
they didn't really go there. They're kind of just like, let's wait and see what this is. Well, if we, we're waiting on this. Once we get to this, we're going to make a plan for this. And that's kind of how we kind of went through the whole treatment. Her whole course of illness
Yes.
was a lot like that. It was, right when we got admitted, they observed her, did some more tests, and said, we are doing surgery on this day for a biopsy. And so then we planned for that.
Right.
And that was like a very like pivotal time was her
Mhm.
biopsy and the date of that too.
Yeah. Because that was going to involve going into, like I said earlier, like this very precarious placement of where this tumor was at for her. So it's something that they found out then that could not be removed.
Yes, yes. And that is, so she had surgery on November the 20th. So we were in
Mhm.
the hospital for 3 days initially, like the 13th, 14th, and 15th of November. We got discharged home just to go kind of rest and get ready for surgery.
Yeah.
And her biopsy, which just to me, the feelings around that, you have a kid and you have this like baby, and here you are, and you're just thinking, I want to protect them from everything. And I'm not like a very crunchy granola person, but I try to like be very healthy and health minded. And I'm like spending my time trying to do the best for her and provide the best for her. And here we are, like somebody's about to cut her brain open. Like I
Ah,
couldn't fathom how I've tried to protect her from all these like things. And it doesn't matter because here we are doing this. And it just was
yes.
a very, very weird feeling for me as a mom in that point.
Yeah, not being able to fix it for her.
Yeah.
Because as a mom of a toddler, like they cry, you go through the checklist.
Yeah.
You go through all the things, and eventually one of the things sticks, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it worked."
That's exactly right.
Yeah, this is a whole different situation for
It
you.
is. It
Yeah.
is.
And I
Um,
really think it's valuable information that you didn't put the cart before the horse during the
mhm.
course of the illness, like you said, and during her treatment through this whole dynamic. You just roll with it as it came up.
We
And
tried to.
I think, yeah. And as much as you tried to, I mean, your intention being that I think is really, really solid. I think it probably helped keep you grounded and
Mhm.
probably even give her more of a benefit in her treatment as
Yeah.
she aged too.
Oh, it absolutely did. I agree with that. I
Mm,
do. Um, it's difficult. It's always going to be difficult if you're in that situation, but just trying to truly like live in each day and like, oh, here's some little things we can tackle today. This is what that time in my life taught me. Like, I can only control so much. There's
oh,
so
wow,
much out
yeah.
of like, so much out of my reach that I can't control. And
Yes.
I can only control what I can control. So don't try to, figure things out in long
Mm,
term. Let's see where we're at today, and let's tackle
mhm. Yeah, it's a real gut check.
that. It is. It is.
I think as a society, like, and especially as a parent, like we want to fix it.
Yeah.
Our child is ill, our child is upset. We want to take care of that
Mhm.
for them. We want to shelter them, especially when they're little. Or, they can be 25 years old
Oh
and we still
yeah,
want to fix
yeah.
it for them,
Yeah, I don't think
It's
that's
just
wrong.
what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about the day of the biopsy. Then that
Mhm.
was November 13th, you said.
So yeah, her MRI was the 13th, and then she had her biopsy on the 20th.
20th. Okay.
And so we had kind of settled in that day. We knew it was going to be a really long surgery. We had friends that had flown in. We had all our family there. We had kind of like set up this camp right at Vanderbilt Children's, and
I
it
love
was
that.
people, yeah, people were coming in and out, friends,
Mhm.
family, and a lot of people checking on us too.
Mhm.
So her surgery ended up being 8 hours long, and it was difficult for us. Like as for Pat and
Excruciatingly
I,
difficult.
it was just painful waiting. We One very notable moment before she went back to surgery, she had to have some pre-op scans done and had all these little Cheerio looking things placed on her head because they had using imaging during the surgery and everything. So I don't know why I didn't think about this before she went in for surgery, but they ended up, I went back to the pre-op waiting area, and she was there, and the anesthesiologist handed me this bag, and it had a lock of her hair in it. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it said Emma's first haircut on it. And I did not think that moment would get me, but it absolutely like crushed me. It crushed me and just made me very emotional because I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine this being her first haircut. She did not have that much hair. Our kids don't have a lot when they're young, but it was a lock of her hair, and it's got like blue marker on it because she had all these markings all over her head. So we still have that, and it is the only lock of hair I think I have from any of my kids. But
that was her first haircut. Then
it was her first haircut on November.
God, Amanda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a weird moment. I didn't think that would mean, like, I'm sure first kid, first haircut, like those things are definitely milestones, but that one just hit in such a different way. And
it's unusual to be a first moment. Yeah. That's, and everything that you had been like, I would imagine the stress inside of your body.
Oh, yes.
For the last, roughly 2 months or roughly month and a half or whatever it was that you were waiting to get all of this process rolling and figure out your game plan and what was going on with your child.
It was. And during that time too, just a small detail of that time was when Emma got diagnosed, I was 7 months pregnant with our second daughter, Caroline. And it just, her personality now, Caroline she's our second daughter, and she is such a roll with the punches, joyful girl.
Yeah.
And I feel like she did that throughout all of Emma's course of treatment and everything. She just was, born into this situation. And she is the type of kid that just tackles everything with a positive attitude. And I think she was meant for this role in her life to be.
For sure. Yeah, for not only just for herself and what she'll bring to the community, but what she brought rather to the situation for you and your husband and your entire family.
Yes,
absolutely. I get you. I would imagine. I mean, I'm just going to say, I don't know that I could have. I don't know how I would have handled that situation, being 7 months pregnant with my oldest going in for a biopsy on a tumor on her brainstem. All of that being said, that being pregnant and having that joyful child that was born in that time frame had to kept you really grounded and very present and reminded you to stay in the day just as much as you had been working on that before.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. If it wasn't, there were many people who were there who brought us food daily, and they would stand and, okay, we're going to watch you eat now because we know you're not eating because you're so stressed. And Caroline is what kept me keeping nutrition in my body. If it wasn't for her, I'm not sure I would have. I was so stressed and so anxious, and just it manifested in no appetite at all. Not hungry and did not want to deal with it. And I was trying to just be there for Emma, who was going through this thing. And I thought, Caroline's safe on the inside right now. And everyone's saying, you need to take care of yourself though, so she will be safe. And so you can go to your due date. And nobody ends up anywhere they need to be earlier than that. So that was definitely, Caroline was a motivating factor for me to stay healthy so that I could be there for my family.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So the 7 to 8 hour surgery happens.
Yes.
And then during that, I mean, what are you thinking during that, other than the fact that your child is this situation, but are you thinking about what could come of this? Or are you thinking about tell me about your process of that day in your thoughts and how you stayed as grounded as possible.
I was just kind of trying to stay in conversation with family, with friends. I would get up and take walks every now and then around the hospital, which is not the best place to be if you're wanting to kind of remove yourself. You see a lot of sick kids. And it wasn't easy. I will say that it just wasn't easy. It was a really, really hard day. Having our family there was helpful because we would be, distracted by different people, and, some friends that were there,
Mhm.
just trying to do the best that they knew how. Nobody knew how to handle this. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew
Yeah.
what to do. And everybody handled it as best that we all could. It was just having somebody there. We would sit there and we would just not talk for 30 minutes, but you felt comfortable because everybody
Yeah.
was just feeling the same feelings on that
Yes.
day. We were we were nervous. I think that was a lot of the emotion that Pat and I felt, especially. I would get up and try to go be by myself for a minute, and I would just go cry. Like, I would
Mhm.
just say, "What is happening? What is going
Mhm.
on?"
Mhm.
Um, and that was kind of the day. We'd get updates throughout that time of, this is what's going on at this point. We're at this part of her brain at this point, and we're closing up. And
Okay.
that was when we finally had heard that she was in recovery. I think we all were breathing
Could take a deep breath.
relief because we
Yeah.
were just so worried with where the tumor was
Yeah.
located, that the brainstem is, your heart rate, your breathing, and all your gross motor. It's so, like, just a vital part of
Right.
your body. And we were just so nervous that the biopsy would even leave her with deficits that would last a lifetime, that would be just, affect her quality of life.
Mhm.
And um, that that had me extremely, extremely nervous.
See, and I
So
didn't even think about that, and I would
yeah.
imagine you as a nurse, that was a big
Mhm.
part of it for you too, that you knew what
Yeah,
could come of that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. And trying to, like, kind of push that aside and just put your faith and your trust in the doctors that are there for that job. But still, it doesn't mean that complications can't arise during these
Mhm.
things, because they do. But hearing that she had come out of recovery, or she was in recovery, and things went well, and that she was seemed to be, as she was, waking up and stuff, neurologically intact, and they were able to, eventually extubate her, and she could breathe on her own. And the sight of her after surgery was something that I feel like you can't be prepared for.
Yeah.
Seeing your child just, and she was, the back of her head was cut open where they could reach her brainstem, and it was cut open from, like, almost midway through her skull all the way down her neck to the top of her, like, shoulders. She had a very long incision,
Gosh.
and it was
She's
just it
still
just scared me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Is that incision still there that
Oh
that
yeah,
she can
yeah.
see? Yeah.
She has a big scar there.
Were the doctors concerned that there was anything else going on? Like, were they while they were checking that, was there ever any or were they pretty conclusive when they saw the MRI that this is I think what we're dealing with and this is where we're
Mhm.
gonna go with it?
They were pretty sure that it was just a primary brain tumor, which,
Okay.
like, wasn't, caused by something else in her body that had spread to the brain. It was
Okay.
something that had originated in the brain. Just like, we think that it's probably, they kept saying, we think that it's probably low grade, but we're not sure.
Okay.
And there's this, one particular type of tumor that, there's a whole different course you take for that.
Mhm.
Um, and that was the whole biopsy, the nervousness. We were
Mm.
just very, very worried that that
Mhm.
is what they were going to tell us
Yeah.
was going on. Because up to that point, it was, we were just doing everything to be safe, and everyone kind of had just said, "We're doing this to be safe, and we're taking these extra steps, and we
Yeah.
think it's probably this," and we were kind of on board. But I just had that lump in my throat that, oh my gosh, everybody is, thinking that it's this, but what if it is this terrible, terrible thing
Right.
that,
Right.
so we
So
are.
when they are finished with the surgery, they're
Mhm.
able to how soon did you know exactly what the treatment plan was gonna be moving forward?
It was about 7 days after that where we got her biopsy results back. So
Oh,
we were
wow.
in a holding. She was in the hospital for a couple days after surgery.
Yeah.
We got discharged home, and then we found out about 7 days later that they had told us that she had a low grade glioma on her brainstem,
Mhm.
and that they had told us initially it was inoperable, that they would not be able to take it out. And typically for low grade gliomas, it's, you just go through surgery, have it removed, and a lot of times you don't need any more treatment.
Yeah.
But the fact that hers was just, pressing inside her pons and in her brainstem, they were just, like, we can't take this out unless we
That's a
want to need
risk.
it. Yes, it was a huge, huge risk for her.
Mhm.
So they were working on the game plan for treatment for her. And we kind of just went during that time of them working on that. Emma had post op complications that had led us back to the hospital a couple of times.
Okay.
So that is, we were kind of like in the thick of that and not given a lot of time to worry about what they're going to do to treat this.
Okay. Which was probably a blessing.
It was, I mean, I would not wish all those complications on anyone,
Yeah.
but it was such a distraction from how are we going to conquer this to like, well, we just need to get her healthy right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Your focus had to be in that. I keep going back to that. That keeps coming up. It's that moment. You have to be in the moment. Like what an interesting way to learn a lesson about staying in the moment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And we had trust in the like medical professionals that were formulating the game plan because they were just so invested in her, her life and her future and her health. And, some of the doctors saying, I have young kids and this is what this is how I would approach this. And
right.
The sensitivity to, we are here in this moment and we are going to contact all different, places around Tennessee. We weren't sure if we were going to go to St. Jude for treatment. We weren't sure if we were going to go somewhere else for treatment.
Or stay at Vanderbilt where you had been, where all of this started. Yeah.
Exactly. So in between the time we found out about the treatment, she had come back home from her surgery. She was in the hospital for just a couple days. Kids are so resilient and they recover so quickly from a brain surgery. Like, I'm thinking I've been for a month, and she was home like 2 to 3 days later.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we get home and we're kind of settled in, and then a couple of days later we notice something just doesn't really seem right with her, and we saw that she was like leaking some fluid from her incision site, which is a massive incision, and it just did not look great. So I had called the neurosurgeon on call. It was late at night. I was like, I don't know for sure, but I think this may be spinal fluid coming out of her skull. And I'm very, very nervous. Like she was inconsolable. She was just lying. She was sitting completely still. She would not move her head one way or the other and just would not stop crying. And we ended up bringing her in to the hospital, to the emergency room. They said, bring her in immediately. And they just like took us, and it was one of those moments where they took us straight back. It was like,
we're waiting on you.
They were waiting on us there.
Yeah.
And when we were there, this was one of the more, besides just like getting a diagnosis, waiting for surgery. This was one of the more painful, one of the more just crushing moments that when we were there. She was like starting to become non-responsive in the ER and was like deteriorating. We lifted up her head and she had a huge like puddle of fluid behind her head. And you could like hit her and she just wouldn't respond to any like stimuli. She wasn't fazed by like any pain. She was just completely out of it.
Wow.
And they ended up, we were in a regular like ER room. They were trying to figure out what they were going to do. And we ended up getting rushed into a trauma room like very quickly. The crash cart came out very quickly. They started working on her, and Pat and I just stood in a corner, just again, like just sobbing. Like we both were absolutely beside ourselves. We thought, what is this, like the worst? We thought like, we're trying to like get through this. Like, what is this complication? Like, why are we doing this right now? Why are we here?
Yeah. How many days after the surgery was this?
It was about probably 7 or so.
Like about a week or so afterwards.
Yeah. So her surgery was on the 20th. I think this was around the 26th or so that this happened. It was right before Thanksgiving. Right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And I think it was on a Sunday night and that we ended up there. And so they ended up sending us up to the ICU, and they had made a plan to try to restitch her incision on the back. And I don't know, I guess they thought there may just be some, like just a little hole back there that some spinal fluid is leaking out of.
And that was what was causing the unresponsive
Yeah.
reaction?
Yeah, it was very odd because we were like, there's something going on inside. And this was a
Yeah.
moment where we were really advocating for her. Like, we think that there is something going on within her skull. And
Mhm.
I think they did some imaging and they couldn't really tell if there was like a big collection of fluid or if there was an actual spinal fluid leak. It was hard to tell at the time. So they're kind of doing like a wait and see approach once they got her stabilized and up to the unit. But when we were at the bedside, they went ahead and they like oversewed her incision, which was so traumatic for me and Pat. I mean, they gave her like Ativan for just, I guess it was like toddler Ativan. And we
Yeah.
just sat with her on the bedside and held her while they stitched up her skull. And it was intense. It wasn't just like any regular stitches. It was
No.
like a mattress stitching on the back of her head. And she just sat there and kind of like whimpered, and it was
Oh,
heartbreaking.
yeah.
It was heartbreaking.
I
Um,
I'm
yeah,
so sorry.
yeah. So they like once they did that, they decided that they were going to put an external drain in to see if some of the spinal fluid could find a way out. So she
Mhm.
had a little drain that was put inside, like right up in her ventricle. And whenever she would get up, this was that like that same maybe that same day, she get up. They have to change where the little fluid basin is, and you have to alternate it so the pressures are right in the
Right.
brain.
Right.
So we had that in for probably a day, and they decided that she needed a permanent shunt in her brain.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that
Was
is,
this because of the surgery that they
yeah.
did or the
Mhm.
biopsies? This was that complication of the surgery. This was not the result of the tumor on the brainstem
Right.
at this point.
That's yes, correct. It
So
was
you're dealing with 2 very large different scenarios. You haven't
yes.
even gotten to address the main reason why you're there yet.
Hmm. That is accurate. Yes, and that was, I think that's what made it so hard was we thought we're gonna have surgery and then we're just gonna have this plan and we're gonna
Yeah.
keep moving forward, putting foot in front of the other. But
Mhm.
because of all this, like the spinal fluid that was leaking, we ended up, she got her VP shunt placed, which she
Mhm.
still has to this day and she'll have for the rest of her life.
Okay.
And it just helps drain any excess spinal fluid down into her belly from her brain.
Isn't
So
that amazing that they
it
have that
really
capability? Will she have to have that replaced at any point during her life as she grows and matures?
only if it is like malfunctioning. So
Okay,
we go and we follow up on that every
okay.
2 years. And if there's any symptoms, which I can get into, we go and get it checked. Like we've had, if we have like splitting headaches or any nausea, we always go get it checked. And
You're
that's
like, "We're
only
on it."
happened, yeah, once or twice. That's the only time it's
Yeah.
happened because those are like symptoms of a shunt malfunction and you want to address them immediately so they can
Yeah,
be,
I imagine so, yeah. So
yeah.
once they got her stable, they put the shunt in,
Mhm.
things kind of leveled off at that point for her with the
They
compli
were, yeah, it was, we ended up getting discharged on Thanksgiving, I believe, and they had done a culture of her spinal fluid. And
Mhm.
they were like, her spinal fluid's good, it's not growing anything. And we're like,
Okay,
oh,
good.
that's wonderful. And then 7 days later, they're like, just kidding, it did grow something now, because a lot of times cultures, it'll take days for something to grow. So she ended up getting like a PIC line, which is like a fancy IV that goes all the
Yeah.
way. Um, and
Oh my
we were,
gosh.
yes, we were put on IV antibiotics that we did at home, actually. So Pat
Mhm.
learned very quickly. I mean, he knew before this, but he really learned quickly how to be a nurse.
This
And
high school teacher has now got another
yeah,
career.
that's
Yeah.
right. So we were
Yeah.
doing, once we ended up going home with IV antibiotics, we were doing those. There was one that was every 6 hours, one that was every 12 hours. So we were just kind of alternating because we had to get up in the middle of the night and hook her up to her antibiotics.
And you had your
Um,
second born?
not
How
yet,
long yet?
not yet. So I was at this point, I was
You're,
like,
like, ready to burst
yeah,
probably.
I was getting close to, this was all still in like November.
Okay, so
Um,
alright. We're still in the
I'm close.
7-month
It
period.
was a lot that happened in a very short amount of time.
Okay,
So we had just found out that right around that time was when we had found out the results of her biopsy,
okay.
and they were working on the plan to see what we need to do. At first, they said, we think that maybe chemotherapy would be the best option. And then they're like, we're going to consult with like St. Jude. We're going to consult with these other people that we know, all their circle. And they met, as a lot of teams do with like a tumor board
Mm-hmm.
to just sit and discuss her case and figure out
Mm-hmm.
the best course of treatment.
Yeah.
So,
Now, this
um,
was not, they knew this was not cancerous at this point, or were they still suspecting
yeah,
it?
after the biopsy, they had found out that it was not cancerous. It was
Okay.
just considered malignant by location because of
Okay.
the sensitive area that it was in,
And
and
the
trying to figure out.
chemotherapy, well, the chemo would have been something that would help to shrink it. Is that my
Right.
understanding?
Mhm. And there are, as we've like gotten older and done a lot more research and, talked to other families who've been in the same boat, there are families who've gone through the chemotherapy realm.
Yeah.
But their tumors have been in different areas of the brain.
Okay.
And so they had decided the best course of treatment for Emma would be radiation. And this was not taken lightly at all
Mhm.
because radiation for a little kid, for anybody, but for a young child, especially a toddler, they don't like to do it on kids under two because their brain is so rapidly developing. And
Yeah.
that was just terrifying to me. It was terrifying. I thought, they've told me now that this, quote unquote non like, or this quote unquote benign tumor that's located in the sensitive area um, probably won't respond to chemo, but the one treatment is radiation, and that is just so scary to me.
Mm.
And to Pat, like we were both. This when I say me, I say we because we were.
Yeah, it's a general collective. Yes, your
It was.
family was totally, I mean, you were just absolutely sidelined with this.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it was,
How soon did they start the radiation?
so we started radiation the day after Christmas. It was December 26th.
Gosh.
She ended up having to have one more surgery before that. They ended up finding out, even with her shunt in, that she had a pinhole leak in her incision side. And so they had to get this like patch and they had to graft her incision. And finally, she stopped leaking spinal fluid. So she had so many surgeries on her head. And I just felt like it was the most delicate area of her body because it had
Yeah.
been, just ripped open so many times.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I was just so, afraid to touch her sometimes because I thought I'd
Mhm.
hurt her and it was all her
Mhm.
head. I mean, all over. She had shunt here, scar here, this here. Then she had the PIC line in her arm
How
that we
was
had to.
she doing as was she up and walking around with all of this? Did you try to keep her kind of situated in one place? I mean, because she's growing, she's wanting
Mhm.
to move and be mobile, and she's a toddler wanting to get into things, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. So during that time, she spent so much time in like hospital beds and in procedures that she had a really hard time walking. Like
Okay.
the first time we walked after her surgery, it was just like she could not get her legs under her. She'd lost so
Mhm.
much strength in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Um, she was like previously extremely mischievous and very much like a toddler. And that's when they're themselves is like when they're
Yeah.
getting into that trouble and just, being
Right.
curious and mischievous. But
Mhm.
she spent a lot of time just sitting because I feel like she just felt terrible during that time.
Mm.
And she
Yeah.
had, medication and they during that time also they put her on steroids
Okay.
and that affected our whole family because
Everybody. Yes.
it was absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
They did that, to get the swelling down in her brain
Yeah.
and in her head, but she was on, a very high dose of steroids, and
Mhm.
it made her very angry. And
Mm.
toddlers are already,
You're already irritable. You put steroid in it and make yeah, you're adding
Mhm.
you're adding gas to the fire already.
That
Yeah.
is exactly right. So,
Oh,
one thing that was, I mean, honestly, a blessing is that she really only wanted Pat. Like
okay.
there were times everybody would be there, like, let me hold you, let me help you. And she was like, no, I want him. I want
She
daddy.
wanted
I
that.
want him.
Yeah.
And me being so pregnant at the time, like, it was really helpful because she
Yes.
was heavy. I mean, she gained a lot of weight on steroids
Yeah.
and, um, it was hard for me to just maneuver her with all this. I did, but
Yeah.
he wasn't there all the time, so she would get upset.
Yeah.
Um, and she would accept me when she needed to, or when I was the only option. And on
Well,
the days she was
my
feeling it.
experience with having females, having girls is that,
Mhm.
like, yeah, they go through those phases and
Yeah,
it's like they want their dad and they want their mom, they want their dad. It's just the ping pong back
it
and
is. It is. And that was
forth.
definitely, and it was amplified with the steroids. And
Yes.
um, we had, it was crazy because he would put something, she'd say, I want this donut or whatever it was that she would want. and you put it in front of her, you would touch it, that she would take it and she would just like throw it at you because she just got really mad, deciding that she didn't want it. So her mood swings were absolutely, it was, it was by far, I would say, having a toddler on steroids going through all that was traumatic for sure. Like,
I mean, I don't want to make light of it, and we're kind of joking about it now, but I think, boy, I can't imagine that either.
Yeah, I hope it's prepared me for whatever lies ahead in the teenage years. You know, you hear
You
all
are
kinds of things.
smooth
Yeah,
sailing.
I hope so.
Just gonna let
Um,
you know, you can handle anything that comes at you at this point, I feel like. Yeah.
I hope
So
so.
your
Yeah.
radiation started with her the day after Christmas.
Yeah.
How many
Yes.
rounds was that? What was that treatment situation?
So she had it was 6 weeks and 5 days a week.
Oh,
And they kind of pushed her radiation back because of all of, we were trying to start it like immediately, but then she had all these complications and they were waiting
yeah.
for swelling to go down. And so it ended up being, you know, our radiation oncologist, he sat me and Pat down and he was just like, I just want to make sure this is perfect. Like she was going to start before Christmas and they were like, we're just not happy with how things are mapped out and we want to make sure it's perfect. And
Yeah.
I am appreciative of that. We
Yeah.
were both appreciative of that. It was like, whatever y'all need to do to make sure it's perfect. We're okay.
Yeah.
So
And at
just
that point too, you knew she wasn't in imminent danger.
exactly.
So you
Yes. If
had
it had
some
been.
relief that you could say, we got a little bit of space. And I've even talked to other people on the show that have had really, devastating health situations
Mhm.
they've gone through. And I think all of them have said, if you can just take a moment and understand that you do 9 times out of 10, you do have some space
Yep.
to
Absolutely.
wait, to process, to advocate and to look
Mhm.
into things, that making sure you're doing the right thing, ask
Yeah.
questions, all the things.
That is absolutely right. And they had told us, there is space for you at St. Jude if y'all want to come, but we're going to do the same thing here. Like they would do the same thing there that they would do at Vanderbilt. So we ended up staying in town because they were like, you're going to be better there with all the support you have.
Yeah.
Um, and so that made us feel good. We knew that they were, both hospitals and both tumor boards and all the teams were on the same page there.
Mhm.
And it just felt like everybody was kind of rallying behind this plan, that it was the right thing to do. And
Yeah.
Pat and I had so many questions about, a lot of it was, okay, we're worried about the immediate, but we know that radiation can affect the future.
Mhm.
And while nobody has, that lens into the future, can you prepare us for that?
Right.
And we were just given, we were given some hypothetical situations, but they're like, we don't really know. And that's
Yeah.
kind of like the game we've played, the last 11 years.
11 years. Yeah.
We're just going to take it, in stride and pray for the best and hope for the best and take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
Did you notice anything along the way over the last 11 years? I mean, is there anything significant maybe that has popped up?
just, with like a growing kid, you're always like, is that normal for them to go through? And she's still like she is still the first to reach every age and every milestone for all my kids. So
Okay.
it's definitely like, okay, I think this is normal. And as she verbalizes anything that is going on that's wrong. When she says, Mom, I have a headache, I do take that a little different than if her
Yeah.
sister were to say that. Not that
Yeah.
I don't listen to them, but I'm just like, okay, where does it hurt? We dig a little deeper into those things.
Absolutely.
And she had a few times in the last few years where I thought she may have been having something wrong with her shunt, but she was okay. So that was good. We took care of that. They're pretty good about getting you in immediately.
Yeah.
And that was good. So they typically, if there's something going on, they'll see us pretty immediately. They'll listen to our concerns and
Yeah.
everything.
Based on this track record, for sure.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so she did all her radiation back
Mhm.
in 2013. And so she started the 26th. Caroline was born January 9th.
Oh my
And
gosh. This
yeah,
is, I mean, like, it's 2 months, Amanda.
it, it was a very intense 2 months. But I remember taking, I was, I worked sporadically during that
Okay.
time. Like I would work a few shifts, but I was just kind of like, I just can't. It is, you got to be on when you're a nurse, you got to be on, you got to be focused. And not that other jobs aren't like that, but there was no room for me to, have any distraction. And that was
Yes.
like very, very hard for me.
Yeah.
So I worked a couple shifts. And then I, had Caroline and went on maternity leave, but we took our parents to radiation to kind of show them the
Mhm.
ropes. And it was she had to be sedated every single day for radiation. I mean, this was
This is
6
5 days
weeks.
a week, you
Yes,
said?
5 days a week, and it was, I talked to my mom about, like, what she remembered about that time, and I'd kind of forgotten because it happened so often, but we would bring her back there. She would just hold her arm out to get her blood pressure taken. She would stand on the scale to get weighed every single day, and then we'd walk her back to the radiation area, and I would hold her, or whoever the adult was that was with her, we would hold her in our arms really tight. They would
Yeah.
give her like the medication that knocks her out, and she would just go limp immediately in your
Oh
arms.
my
Like,
God.
it was a crazy feeling of dead
Mhm,
weight. And then we handed her over immediately. They put
mhm,
the mask on her, and then
mhm,
she had a huge, like a netted mask she wore for radiation.
mhm.
And they gave her radiation, sent her to recovery, and then we would go home every day and just try to, get
That
through
was
the
your
day.
normal.
That was normal for a little bit. Yep. It
That was
was.
your normal for what, like 6 weeks? And then you have
Mhm.
a baby.
Yes, and that was not easy. I will not sugarcoat that. That was hard.
Yeah.
We had help, and it was hard. We
Yeah.
had a lot of help, and it was hard.
Mhm.
But I was recovering from a C-section, and I couldn't drive, so I was home. It tore me up to not to be able to be there for Emma on all those days. But, like, if she's going to be with anyone, it's my mom, Pat's mom, Pat, like our family that are there with her and know they're medical, like they know what's going on. They help her.
Yeah,
So that was so, like, reassuring.
absolutely.
And the very last day of her radiation was like February, I think the 7th or so of
Mhm,
2013. And that day she ended up like spiking a fever. It was her last day,
mhm.
and they took her blood sugar, and it was like in the 40s, and she just looked ill. She was
Yeah,
sick.
just not right. Yeah.
So yeah, she ended up at that very last day of radiation. She ended up getting admitted to the hospital, and she had she was just there for a couple days. They kind of took care of everything. She had an infection. They pulled her
Okay.
PICC line out. And that was kind of like the day we started like looking towards our recovery. Like, that
Okay.
was the milestone of, okay, we're done with radiation. We got through this hopefully last hospital stay.
Yeah.
Um, now what? Now what?
Yeah.
What does life look like?
So
So
what do? You go home and they say, "She's good to go. We're gonna see her how often?"
So we were going back every 3 months. We ended up going back, I think it was 4 weeks after her radiation finished,
Yeah.
to do an initial scan to see how things looked. And
Mhm.
that was, so we had that, and then we had one 3 months after. So that first scan, they couldn't really tell a lot because there was so much swelling from
Yeah.
radiation. And that was, I think it was expected, but they didn't see any growth. So that was good.
Okay, good.
And then 3 months later, we like got word that her tumor had shrunk. So we were like, "This is amazing," and we knew that it could continue to shrink because of the effects of radiation.
Yes.
And so that was like what we were hanging on to. And she was
Yes.
doing well, and she wasn't like she was just kind of dealing with all the things, the aftermath of being put through all of this stuff.
Right.
And
Yeah.
she turned 2 that April, and so we were just kind of like starting. Okay, we're going to be going to the doctor, a lot of labs drawn,
Mhm.
following up with a lot of different people, like
Mhm.
surgeons, oncologists, radiation oncologists, all these people who were all communicating with each other,
Mhm.
um, just on her status. So that's kind of where that led us at that point.
And that had to have been a cakewalk from the 3 months that you were in
It
the middle
was, it
of.
was definitely, the medically being in the hospital, I think it was much easier. I will say that having a newborn during that time was, it was hard. It was hard. It was,
Mm,
it
mhm.
was, if I wasn't, we had kind of talked about this. If I can't imagine if I was not already pregnant with Caroline, I don't know when we would have felt comfortable thinking about having another kid. I
Yeah.
really don't. And that is, something that affected us during that time. I'm so grateful for that, and for her, and for everything she's brought to our family. But I really, truly, I think if I hadn't have been pregnant, I don't know at what point we would have felt comfortable,
Right.
expanding our family.
Because is it something that have you been concerned as you have 4 children
Mhm.
altogether, including Emma, were you concerned that something would show up? This was some kind of genetic situation that might happen throughout your family?
It definitely was. That is definitely part of it. And also it was just like, how do you like say I'm pregnant during all this, traumatic stuff that's happened, and how
Yeah.
can you I don't know, I just felt so something about me felt so weird about, bringing somebody else in when we have our hands full already, and how do you
Yeah.
navigate all that? And I think we were just forced to do it, and
Yeah.
it worked out in how it was supposed to, and our family worked out the way like it was intended to be. um,
Yes.
Now there is like a 5-year gap between Caroline and our two boys, which is
You're
great.
right, you needed some breathing space.
Yeah, we did. We did need some breathing space. But yeah,
Yes.
it's really like, it was tough. It was tough
Yeah.
for the newborn.
So she's 12 and a half. How
Mhm,
is she obviously all this happened was she was developing.
mhm.
How do you see her being different from her peers at this age? What do you notice as a mom when you're like at a school party
Mhm.
or a sporting event or any kind of function?
We always talk about like, is this what Emma would have been like if she were like did not have this going on,
Oh,
or
wow, that's
is this a
yeah.
cause of, and we don't know. So like a lot of things, personality traits and different things with her, we're kind of like, is this how Emma was, or is this something effective, from the tumor?
Yeah.
And it's hard to say for some of it because, when things affect your brain, it can affect many different things. And
Yeah.
when you have radiation, it can also affect many different things as you're growing. And
Mhm.
um, when Emma was like right before she was diagnosed and everything, she used to just be like running around, like chucking a ball at us, everything really coordinated. And
Mhm.
and this was right around when she turned 1. She walked really early.
Okay.
And so we were just like used to that. And then after, she just it was a struggle. It was a struggle. We ended up going to physical therapy to kind of learn how to walk again. She could not
Right.
walk upstairs, so she learned how to walk upstairs. She learned how to ride a tricycle. She had to get strong again. Her
Yeah.
gross motor skills still to this day, she has to work
Extra hard.
twice as hard. Yeah. So we do a sport like volleyball, where a lot of hand-eye coordination, quick reflexes. It is very hard for her.
Okay.
And she tries so hard, and I commend her for even like being out there. She tries so hard, and she wants
Yeah.
to be out there. But it's hard. It is hard for her. And
Well,
picking
do
up
you think that's
yep,
because of the
I do.
situation?
Yes, I do. And I think we all kind of agree that that is part of it. She has a lot of trouble with just like, you know, space and time management, like, oh, a ball's coming, like what is in any sport with like an
Okay.
object, it's a little bit harder for her
Yeah.
with timing. And she runs cross country, and just like strength wise and
Yeah.
getting her legs to do the motions, like the gross motor, this big running, jumping,
Mhm.
big things are hard. They're just hard. And so she's worked slowly and has increased and
Mhm.
done so well. I mean, just so well for her. And I know she'll continue to do that throughout her
Yeah,
life. But
sure.
it's hard sometimes to see other kids where just excel,
Mhm.
um, and things come really easy, and you have a kid who has to work a lot harder,
Extra hard.
especially in athletics. And for Pat and I, we're so patient with her, and so
Yeah.
proud of her, so proud of her. Um, and how like she's progressed over all the years.
Mhm.
Now, academically, she has had to work really hard, also just attention wise. And that is one of the big things with radiation. It's just like the attention and executive functioning, like figuring out, okay, I have these 3 things to do. What's the most important? And like,
Prioritizing,
yeah,
yeah.
prioritizing, and then time management. We walk with her through these things still, and it's important that she feels supported,
Mhm.
um, and that we're there for her throughout school, sports, life, emotions, friends.
Mhm.
um, and she's right now she's just a normal, I would say, Swifty loving preteen, so she kind
Oh,
of fits right in. She's yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
But also, like, I mean, this is a real lesson in not taking for granted the very simple tasks that our bodies can do on a daily basis.
absolutely, it really is. It really is. It makes me I mean, I appreciate what I've been given and my gifts. And I think I was meant to be her mom. I mean, we all feel that way about our kids, but it just, she was given to us for a reason, and we'll take care of her and support her for the rest of her life.
Yeah. Would you think that that's the biggest blessing for you out of all of this?
Or
is there something more?
I think the gift of having perspective for me is one of the biggest things. I mean, I truly have like a good perspective, and try to remember that just daily. I mean, it's hard sometimes. You get caught up in life, but just taking yourself back. Like I said, this time of year is always like just brings back memories, and it really puts things into perspective, thinking about what things were like, and the battles that we had gone through, and just being on an uphill battle for a while, but making it out through the end and seeing her do well and
it's
succeed.
Gratifying. Yes. It's very fulfilling. And I imagine you took pictures through all of this. You share that stuff with Emma?
Yeah, we do. And she's just like, oh my gosh, I was so big. She was a steroid baby on pictures of her scars. And she's like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that it went that high up, because her hair covers it now. She's like beautiful blonde hair that covers it all. And she's just kind of like, that is crazy that I went through that. Oh my gosh, I can't remember, she can't remember it. So
right.
Like, this is, it's crazy to me. And she just kind of got to the point, after this, this last year and the scan, she's at a new school this year and has been just accepted by this group of kids with open arms. And they're just the sweetest bunch. And she's been a lot more open about her like medical history. And when she had her last MRI, her class like celebrated this with her. They had like a party with her, and she got this statue, and it was, I mean, absolutely the sweetest, most thoughtful thing. She got to go up to the class and like kind of tell them a little bit about, her story, and she's very shy. So her going up and doing this was a huge deal. So
and up until this point, she didn't really want to share that story with others, because I know there are like, I talked to another mom a couple weeks ago that said, her son going through leukemia when he was young he's now he's in remission, and he's functioning amazing, and he's in high school, and he started a new high school, and he is now, it's something he doesn't want to be a label for him, basically.
I can totally. And as a parent, that was kind of my concern with when we started a new school too. I thought nobody knows really anything about it. There was a handful of people who kind of knew. And I said, we're just going into this as you're just a kid. And she feels that way too. But I think, her missing school for this MRI, and just, they're like, well, what were you doing? And so they were like asking her, and she was like, okay, like I will talk about it. And she's just been so quiet and reserved about it. And I don't think it was really for any reason other than just not maybe having the connection that she has now with the people that she's around, and feeling just so supported in where she is, like, which makes me so happy, like just so incredibly happy.
Yeah. As parents, do you still carry any fear that this will materialize into something else for her?
Oh, I mean, I would be, I can't say no to that. I mean, the last 11 years of doing yearly MRIs, it brings up anxiety, even when things have been stable and you had something that was low grade. But it was almost like the first few years we were anxious because, like, radiation's kind of wearing off. What do we see? How is it there? And we always just had this little piece of tumor that was just sitting there, kind of just hanging out, dormant, not really doing anything. And so the last few years, it's been stable. Nothing's happened. And we get like a sense of, okay. But we also started going to the survivorship clinic, where they just have this whole plan laid out for you as post-treatment, post-diagnosis of, you had this treatment, you had this diagnosis. These are all the things that can affect you down the road. These are what we watch for. And so we're like, on watch for her thyroid because of scattered radiation. Like, she has labs, drawn for different things. And we are, anytime there's a concern for me, I can go to them, and I feel completely comfortable that, they will address it and we'll make a plan. And I feel better equipped in my age now than I did back back then.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, 12
The
years
more
of being a
so, yes,
mom to
yes.
multiple children. Yeah,
Yeah, so
too.
definitely feel more comfortable with, speaking up and saying this is not that I did it back then, but just like very like advocating
Yeah,
even
it's
more
different.
so now. And
It's
everybody,
very
like people listen. I'm very comfortable with our team, and everybody's so receptive of what mom has to say.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
it's great. Yeah, and because you're a part of it, you're such a vital part of it because that
Mhm.
mom gut instinct is so real,
It
so
is.
vital,
It
and so
is.
valuable and on every level for not just for Emma, but for all of your children. So, I mean, do you feel like your antenna have kind of tuned in a little bit more?
Yeah, oh yeah. I like it's weird because part of me is like, my head is always on a swivel for what's going on with all the kids. And then a part
Yeah.
of me is still that part that's like, you got to scrape, go like brush it off. And so I
Yeah.
have this like very good balance of saying, okay, I know what seems to be important, and maybe not that things aren't important, but maybe what needs attention and what can wait a little bit.
Yeah, your barometer has kind of
Mhm.
you figured that out. Yeah,
Yeah,
based on all of this.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
What an intriguing story for her. I hope that she continues to dive into it
yeah.
and let it be told when she's comfortable because she's a survivor.
She is. Yeah.
And that's a really big deal. It's a hard thing to go through all that stuff. And it's equally as hard for her family to be right there with her going through it too. I
Mhm.
understand that for sure. But
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it definitely, I mean, challenges within just like our family unit and
mhm.
trying to navigate that as young parents.
Yeah.
And like I said, we had just endless support. I would not like I could go on for days and days about the things that were done for us during that time. People gave of themselves just with like monetarily, with their time, with
Yeah.
just being there for us. But even Pat and I, we had to grow, and it has made us and our relationship just stronger throughout that.
That's great because it could go a completely different direction
Yeah,
as
it
well.
really could.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you have to work at that to keep your
Mhm.
relationship and that integrity intact for the 2 of you through all of this?
Yeah, I think, and we talked about this recently. We talked about how we were just in the moments of November, right when she got diagnosed. We were just in like a shock, and
Yeah.
one foot in front of the other. Let's do this. Like, and and then Caroline was born, and Pat and I had just kind of leaned on each other through that, through that time. Caroline was born. It was like it's such a memorable moment. All the nurses were like taking pictures during the C-section, of not of my stomach or anything, but
Yeah,
he
but at the
and
baby?
I,
Yeah.
we didn't know if she was a boy or a girl. And so
Oh,
that whole thing gave us something to look forward to also.
yeah.
It was like this baby, first of all, and then second of all, well, we don't know what we're having, and it's so exciting. And
Yes.
I mean, any time in your life, that's exciting. But during that moment when we really needed just some little something to get us through, what do we have, a boy or a girl?
Yeah.
And so the day she was born, and they had taken her from my stomach and said, hey dad, you want to say what it is? And he was like, it's a girl. And I just immediately got very emotional because I
Yeah.
thought, how lucky is Emma to have a sister. I never had a sister. Pat doesn't have any sisters.
Oh, that's
We just
amazing.
felt like, and they quarrel to this day like sisters do, but they
Yes.
also like, you know, are attached at the hip at the
Yeah,
same
they're
time.
tight. They gotta be tight because I mean, there's a bond there. There's a
Yes,
really strong bond there.
there is. There is. And they'll learn that even more as they get older, and,
Mhm.
grow in their own selves. But yeah, it was that. And just so he and I talked about once she was born. That's when like things shifted a little bit for us.
Uh-huh.
um Initially it was just like we were trying to kind of go through the motions. It was hard. I was recovering from surgery,
Mhm.
and Caroline was home, and Emma was going through treatment, and he had to go back to work. And
Mhm.
either, usually we'd had either my mom or Pat's mom there to help with whatever child needed the most help at that time. Sometimes it
Yes.
was Emma, sometimes it was Caroline. But I felt like I was drowning. I still felt,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I just kind of want to go to work or something. This is
Yeah.
very difficult. This is very difficult. Um, and I'm sure I lashed out at him a time or two. But
Well, I mean, it's understandable. And I'm sure he could say the same thing and he could look back and go, you know, same
he,
thing from his perspective as well, as
oh
far as
yeah,
being overwhelmed.
I
Yeah.
think so. And he said like he recognized that in me. And when we started talking through it and working through it, as we typically do, I know a lot of people say like communication obviously is one of the biggest things in a marriage.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're going through these motions, sometimes you just sit with each other and you
Mm,
don't say a word,
yeah.
but it says a lot. And there were many times during that where we would just sit, we would just hold each other, where sometimes we would talk through it. But it has certainly, um, over the years, when we talk through things, it has made us stronger. And I
Mhm.
think each year it just kind of builds. We have this foundation of something kind of terrible, but it also has really, like, our character has come from that, and just things show through these
Yeah.
moments that you didn't know when you were standing at the altar saying "I do," or when you're back in college going to parties. Like,
Yeah.
this
Like
is where
this
we're going to
is where
be.
this is where we're going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think this whole conversation has just been a really, really valuable for me to hear that really great insight and perspective. I think that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest takeaway from me that I hope others can hear too is staying in your moment,
Mhm.
taking it as it comes at you and understanding that so much is out of our control. So what is it that we can do? And staying in that moment and being present with our loved ones and being able to communicate what our emotions are and really allow them to be felt is, gosh, that's healing as you're going through the process as well as afterwards too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's cathartic for me to talk about it. I always,
Mhm.
say when I'm updating, like social media, it's a healing for me,
Yeah.
also to just be able to speak about it. And I always talk, just a caveat, like I always talk to Emma before this. I'm like, I want to say these things, or are you comfortable with me as she gets older and, with social media being so big, and she's really supportive. And if she
Yeah.
ever said no, don't, then I wouldn't, but it's her
Yeah.
story too. So
Well, that right
yeah.
there speaks volumes because I don't know a lot of parents that would run that by their children. So it
Cool.
tells me how selfless you are. You
Thanks.
know, I think that's beautiful. It's
Thank
something
you.
that it's her journey and you're keeping that in mind for her.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. I don't want to
And
say anything that would pop back up years later. That was
right. And she would be like,
like,
uh,
oh, hey,
uh,
mom, how about this
yeah.
once?
But even more than that, you're valuing her as a
Yeah,
human being. You know,
absolutely.
it's just respect for her and her
Mhm.
process, which is
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of rare, unfortunately, but I'm
Mhm.
really, really she's very lucky to have that. She's very lucky to have you and Pat in her corner.
Thank you. Thank
Amen.
you.
Amen.
I'm lucky
Amen.
to have her. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
I want to wrap up today with
Nice.
some rapid fire questions because I always
Okay.
like to kind of leave it a little bit lighthearted and learn a
Yeah.
little bit, maybe the other side of your personality. You've given us so much great information and have been so honest and so upfront and so vulnerable. So thank you for that. But let's have a little bit of
Mm.
some fun.
Okay.
All
Thank you for
right.
having me.
Yeah. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Ready.
Okay. So first question for you, Amanda. You feel like you're like on a game show?
I
First
do. I do.
question. Where did you go on your last vacation?
We went to like the Destin Panhandle area of Florida with the
Okay.
family. Yeah.
Oh, was it like fall break? Is that what
It
you went?
was actually summer. We didn't do anything for fall break. We had,
Okay.
football calls.
Oh my gosh, that's right. But okay, so where is your husband's team right now? Like this will be later aired later that like maybe we
Mhm.
can they can post, oh, they won Lake
Um,
State.
so yeah, it's going to be disappointing. He'll probably be disappointing.
Oh
He'll
no.
be disappointed to hear me talk about it. They lost in the first round of the tournament.
Oh
Um,
no.
Heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking, but we move on. We respect this past season, put one foot in front of the other for the next season.
And going
So,
forward,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
that's
He's
what you gotta
definitely
do.
heartbroken, but I think he said to me exactly. He said, "I can look back and things like losing a game in a football game, which he is so passionate about,
Mhm.
and thinking about where he was, 11 years ago, and it doesn't matter. It just
Yeah.
doesn't matter." And
Yeah.
so that was. I know we're trying to leave this lighthearted and everything, but that's truly how he feels.
Yeah, no, that's part of it. That's
Mhm.
amazing. That's another whole big piece that given the situation had not happened, he may not be at that point at this
Yeah.
point. And that makes him a really valuable coach
Yeah, he
because
is. He's a great
he
coach.
leads with that. Like
Yeah,
that's him. That's his MO, if you will.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
great. All right. Question number two.
Mhm.
Whoops, sorry. What do you look forward to most each day?
I look forward to my morning moments of peace.
Okay.
So we get at this point this year, Pat is able to take the kids into school in the morning. I help get everybody ready and get out the door. And as soon as they do that, I go get my exercise in whatever form I feel like doing. And then
Yeah.
I sit and have my water and my coffee before I start my workday. And it is so peaceful.
Oh,
So
I love
peaceful.
it. Love
Yes.
it. I think
Mhm.
that's a really great way to start your day. It's very grounding
Yes,
and
it
it's
is.
nurturing.
It is, and it prepares
Yay.
me for whatever lies ahead. I have learned as having any amount of kids, having 4 kids in school, if I don't take care of myself in the morning before I get a call that somebody's sick or somebody's needed, then
Yeah.
I will feel completely out of sorts. So I always like
Yeah.
to first thing in the morning.
My kids used to ask if I was in a kind of a lousy mood later in the day,
Mhm.
they asked me if I had two things. Did you meditate today? Did you exercise today? Because
Mhm.
I can tell you didn't do
That's
one or the other.
yeah,
Like,
it's
oh,
true.
gee,
They can tell
thanks.
too.
Thanks for
They can,
calling me out, you little
right?
people.
Yep,
Like,
they
out of the
know.
mouths of babes. Right.
Yep.
Oh, all right. This is a good one.
Okay.
Question number 3. What is the cringiest thing that you did as a teenager?
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty of cringy things I did. Hmm, I would say if I had to go look back at any note I wrote during that time, because that was like the most popular form of communication, no phones or
Yes.
anything. Anything written in those notes was probably super cringy. And the amount of prank calling I did as a teenager too was
Yeah.
kind of cringy as well. And it was
Okay.
only home phones, like it was just a little cringe. It was
I love
fun.
it.
It was good. It was good, clean fun, but
Very good. I love it. And I'm right there with you, sister.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, we're hand in hand in that one. All right, number 4. Do you make New Year's resolutions?
I was thinking about that. Like, I don't think I do. I haven't. I think I just try to, and it's not that I don't want to be disappointed. I just don't. I just kind of
Yeah,
live and go through life and have some good routines already and good solid things. And
yeah,
while there are things in my life that maybe I wish I could alter or change or improve, I don't make resolutions out of them. Just kind of
yeah.
try to live in the day.
And again, it's your experience. I
Hmm.
mean, that's a really interesting question based on our conversation. Like,
Yeah,
you are
yeah,
in your moment. So, yeah, New Year's resolutions
absolutely.
are just your life,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
Yeah.
they are. They are. They are.
Gosh.
Yeah.
All right, last one, and I'll let you off the hook. What is rather your most strongly held belief?
Mm. That's a good one. That's a really good one because that gets you thinking.
Yeah.
I think that and I don't know if I'll say this in the right way, but what I want to say is like in the end, like being a good person will always get you ahead.
Mhm.
Doing the right thing and being a good, solid person will you will win in the long run, no matter
Yes.
what. Maybe short term things don't go your way. That happens to us, but being a good person in the end will get you far in life.
Again, amen. Drop the mic. Got
Yeah.
it.
And I
So
hope my
true.
kids listen to that. If anything
Yes,
else, I
yes.
hope they
Tell them.
listen to
I
that.
want you to go to the end and listen to this
Yeah,
very distinct
I have
segment
something
because,
very important to tell you.
yes, this is very important. This is what I have to say.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you're in the moment to do the right thing, but I was trying to tell my kids, like, hey, just do the right thing. Just do the
Yeah,
right thing. It's
yeah,
it will pay down line, and it doesn't pay monetarily. It pays
exactly.
you in faith and morality and
Mhm.
self-esteem and just feeling good about what you can contribute. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree 100%.
Yay. Well,
Yeah,
Amanda, I'm so glad that you joined me
yeah,
today. This has
yeah.
been so delightful to catch up with you and get the whole story.
Oh,
It's
thank you for
beautiful.
having me. It's
Yeah.
been so healing for me as well, and I
Oh.
appreciate it so much.
And hey, I'm gonna say congratulations on Emma's milestone because
Yes.
she just had her last MRI,
Yep,
what,
a
maybe a couple
huge,
weeks ago.
huge milestone. Yes, it was just a couple weeks ago. Her last MRI, quote unquote, ever, unless something came up down the road, but we won't even, we're just today, the day.
Yeah,
They decided, since things are looking good, we don't need to do anymore. And I mean,
it's
after like
amazing.
20 MRIs, she's good. And that's what they were celebrating at school. And it was so sweet to have her like share that with her little friends and her teachers.
Absolutely. Gosh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
beautiful. And I'm
Thank
so,
you.
so happy for her. I'm happy for all of you for that.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank
Well,
you.
give all your children a little hug. Tell your
You
husband I
know,
said hello.
we'll do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, a great rest of your week.
You too, Dawn.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. If you have an idea for an interview or you would like to share your own story, I would love to hear from you. Send me a message at dawn@thesoulgoals.com. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love for you to leave a review and to consider following and subscribing to the show. With weekly releases, there is always another interesting story to be heard. I do hope that today's guests and their words have helped to bring some extra light to your day and encouraged you to find a deeper space of your very own soul goals. Until next time, friends, remember that everyone has a story and every story matters.